In a full-part series, the current United States of America ambassador at the United Nations came out pretty clear on where the U.S. stands with regards to Sudan. The Sudan question is the most abandoned conflict that the world has ever seen. No one talks about it. It's irrelevant. And the African Union itself, there are a number of questions here. The United States ambassador came out clear and elaborate on where the United States stands and how they perceive the conflict in Sudan, talking about a wide range of issues on where they perceive this conflict to sit. And it's devastating from the way they look at the conflict in Sudan, from marginal actors to important actors, and where does the continent organization body stands, and how they perceive the conflict to be a conflict where there is too many interest into it from other partners. This goes a long way to shed light that Sudan should understand that you are on your own.
And try to do to not be in the situation that we are in with Sudan right now?
Cameron, those are some tough questions. And let me just start by saying it's not just Sudan that gets the short stick, short-shrifted in the international community. It's Africa broadly. Sudan happened to be the crisis of the day on the continent, but any crisis on the continent, we generally don't give it the attention that it needs, not internationally, and I would even argue not even here in our own country. And so Sudan has suffered from initially all of the attention was focused on Ukraine, and then all attention was focused on Gaza. And Sudan was nowhere to be seen. And for me, having worked on African issues for my entire career, I could not sit back and not let let that happen.
If you think you're going to continue fighting, causing all the current damages that are known, and you are not attempting to work out stuff and expecting that the geopolitical partners will be the one to bring the solution, I think you are foolish. Because, again, like the ambassador said, nobody cares at the moment. U.S. role and influence in it, she's explained it to you. There's no better way to say it. And who is paying the price? The Sudanese people.
As with so many African conflicts, the latest fighting in Sudan has brought death and misery to huge numbers of civilians. But this time even the UN has been shocked by what it called the unprecedented speed of disintegration. Whatever happened to Africa's long-lost promise to silence the guns? Mo Ibrahim seeks answers to such questions. He's a Sudanese-born British billionaire with a foundation that researches Africa's problems and rewards those who try to solve them. Does he ever lose faith in Africa?
There are setbacks in some countries. Unfortunately, one of them is my country. But we will find a way forward.
And I understand that the government of Kenya has got into some kind of a process that they have tried to an extent to engage.
We are also deeply concerned that members of the diplomatic community have been targeted and civilians in general have been caught in the crossfire. A pattern of systematic violation of established norms and principles of international humanitarian law is clearly emerging, and this situation is evolving into a threat to regional and international peace and security. Kenya implores the leadership of the two parties to ensure full compliance with the resolution of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development Heads of State Summit held last Sunday. This includes an immediate cessation of hostilities, allowing unrestricted humanitarian access, and extending full cooperation to the IGAD Heads of State mission when it visits Khartoum.
However, external actors are having huge influence in regards to what's going on in the country. But despite that particular external influence, the two generals themselves also have questions to answer. Let me use her words. She said, the generals have to answer. You will answer, according to what she said. So, what that means, I don't know. You can only read it from the geopolitical perspective, which will mean there will be accountability.
It's great to be sharing this time with you to talk about topics that are near and dear to your heart, to all of our hearts here, I think, which is the U.S. relationship with Africa. I want to start off by talking about kind of current day, where we are right now on some of the big issues, where the Biden administration will be leaving things, turning over to the Trump administration in just a couple of days. And I want to start with maybe the hardest issue out there, which is Sudan. And it's one that you have worked tirelessly on. You've kept it on the agenda of the UN. I know from your staff that you have been a quiet force within the U.S. government, trying to elevate and give weight and muscle to our response. But I also know, you and I have worked together on Sudan 20 years ago, and so, well, sadly, sadly, yes. So we've seen some of this before. There's a lot of deja vu with what we are experiencing in Sudan today. And so first, I just want to ask, one of the criticisms that has been levied, not just against the United States role, but the international role, is that Sudan is no longer rising to the level of attention that it needs for there to be a serious response to the humanitarian situation, the fighting that's going on, let alone giving any kind of thought to what a future civilian government might look like in the country. Can you explain to us where things stand right now with respect to increasing humanitarian access, with how you view the situation on the ground, and then also a reflection on, what have we gotten wrong? What have we not done enough of? What, if you had to do over again, could we go back and try to do to not be in the situation that we are in with Sudan right now?
Cameron, those are some tough questions. And let me just start by saying it's not just Sudan that gets the short stick, short-shrifted in the international community. It's Africa broadly. Sudan happened to be the crisis of the day on the continent, but any crisis on the continent, we generally don't give it the attention that it needs, not internationally, and I would even argue not even here in our own country. And so Sudan has suffered from initially all of the attention was focused on Ukraine, and then all attention was focused on Gaza. And Sudan was nowhere to be seen. And for me, having worked on African issues for my entire career, I could not sit back and not let let that happen. I couldn't let it happen in the United Nations, and I couldn't allow it to happen internationally. So I made a commitment to raise at every effort, at every opportunity, the situation in Sudan. I took a group of press to Sudan, to the border with Sudan, to Chad, and I will say that they really did some amazing reporting. I had NBC, I had NPR, I had Reuters with me on that trip. And And whenever I would give a press briefing on Sudan and someone would toss a question at me about Ukraine or toss a question at me about Gaza, I would remind them that that's the problem, that no one wants to focus on the issue at hand at that particular conference. So I kind of made it a habit of shaming the press to get them to pay attention to Sudan. And I think we succeeded in doing that. New York Times did a really amazing piece on Sudan. I did an op-ed in the New York Times that they actually printed. And we started to focus more attention. But I think the problem is, and this happens all over the world, we see one solution. And when we get to that one solution, we move on. So in the case of Sudan, we saw this amazing effort on the part of civilians who were in the streets, women who were raising their fists and really fighting for civilian rule, and they succeeded. And we applauded them, and we embraced them, and we moved on. And military guys don't give up easily. And these two guys who had fed on each other suddenly decided that they wanted power. It wasn't just enough to put power in the hands of civilians. And when they couldn't decide among themselves who was going to be the voice, they started fighting among themselves. And that's where we are today. And so we have put pressure on both sides, because there are no good guys in this fight. They both deserve to be held accountable. But we're also seeing the actions of others. This has become a regional war. And the actions of others feeding the two sides to continue the fighting. And the people who are suffering are the tens of millions of Sudanese who have been forced from their homes.
So, the U.S. came out clear. I think this is a mouthpiece with regards to the United States' current position. Don't mistake her words for something else. She's pretty clear on where U.S. stands with regards to, or how the U.S. perceive the conflict in Sudan to mean in their own eyes. And the current destruction is unheard of. And we understand that the current leader, the military leader, looking to galvanize or to kind of slow things down and to lead the nation, or some say a recognized person who is recognized at the moment to be the one, the general that's being recognized by other partners to be the person who should be leading the country. And you have the other general who is also there to claim that they are the ones that need to be recognized. So it is a time where the continent of Africa should sit back and really look at things from a 380 degrees angle. That if we cannot solve these little issues, talking about looking at the current conflict in the DRC Congo and Rwanda and other regional conflicts, I think the conflict in Sudan has demonstrated that the African Union has its own flaws. Again, we continue to wait for the Europeans, the Americans, or the Russians, or the Chinese, the Turks, other Middle Eastern partners to come and look for a solution in Sudan. How devastating is that? So the Sudanese war at the moment, it's the most abandoned and not recognized conflict. Let me put it that way, because no one wants to talk about the Sudan situation.
Mo Ibrahim, Sir Mo Ibrahim, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thanks, Tim.
You've tried for many years to promote better governance in Africa. In some countries, you've had some success, but the violence never seems to go away. In Sudan, the country of your birth, decades of fighting, and now the killing has begun again in earnest. How personal is this conflict to you?
It's very personal. It's terrible, and our people deserve better than this. And what we have here is two sides armed to the teeth, fighting a battle in our capital. Each side wants power, and with power comes financial resources. It's a terrible story. And this is a story of soldiers. Military coups is essentially old story, unfortunately. And enough is enough for all those guys.
Despite pledges by both sides to respect humanitarian principles, there hasn't been the slightest effort to avoid civilian casualties. Why is that? They don't care?
Absolutely. I don't really care. Each of them think they can somehow win this. They cannot be a winner here. They cannot be a winner. They're only losers. Every side is losing, and the Sudanese people are losing. The little infrastructure we have is being destroyed. And the country really is in a mess. And more civilians are dying than soldiers. It is very sad.
Do you ever lose faith in Africa?
No.
Despite all this that's going on?
Yes, but that's one country out of 54 countries. According to our index, over the last 10 years, we produce an index to measure governance in Africa. The majority of 2/3 of Africans living in a better governed countries than 10 years ago. So are moving forward. There are setbacks in some countries. Unfortunately, one of them is my country. But we will find a way forward.
Like the ambassador said, nobody want to talk about it each time, especially when the Russian-Ukrainian war break out. Sudan conflict became secondary, absolutely secondary. Nobody give a damn on Sudan. And the Sudanese people should wake up and start listening to what's going on. Nobody cares about you. And if you want to destroy your entire nation, you want to go ahead hoping that the solution is going to come from Turkey or from other strategic partners, I think you are mistaken. The U.S. has come out clear. They have spoken. They've told you where they stand with regards to your current challenges that you are going through. And there will be consequences. We know how that works. We know what the procedures are. We know what the challenges are. So if you are engaged in this and there is a window of peace, I urge you to review all options and put that little ego on one side, because it's not going to go anywhere. The U.S. has come out clear, especially at this time when an administration is going out, a new administration is coming in the U.S., there is always a lot of uncertainty. Absolutely uncertainty. That's happening. That's normal in the geopolitical environment.
Let me ask you about that. Just again, reflecting back on the experiences that you had in the first Darfur genocide and the efforts of the then Bush administration and going into the Obama administration to try to end that. It seems that as much as we have done, as much as the United States has done, and it's the largest donor to humanitarian aid in the country, we have a very active special envoy who has been moving nonstop around the region. It feels like the U.S. Role is less effective today than it has been in the past, that we're gaining less traction or that we are less listened to. And at the same time, at the UN, you have seen some of the enablers of this war use the UN, tie it up in ways that we didn't see, a generation ago. Is the U.S. losing its claim to authority on these issues? Is it becoming harder for the United States to resolve these kind of nettlesome conflicts in a way that we were able to lead on in the past?
I think in the past, not only were we able to lead, we were the only one. So we were, it was us, and nobody else played in the sandbox on this. So we were able to exert a lot more power, a lot more influence than in the past. Now you just had players from across the board, with players from the Middle East. We have different players on the continent who are engaging in this. And so our place has been diminished. I won't say that we've been sidelined, but we've been diminished in the sense that we have to share now that platform with a lot of different voices. So the Jeddah process was not just us. It was Saudi Arabia, it was Egypt. There were other players that were engaged who had been contributing to this war. And then you add on top of that the role played by Russia, feeding both sides of the conflict. So it makes it harder to find solutions. And that's where I think it's important for the UN to be much more engaged, to exert much more influence, to flex your muscles more, because they become I think the even hand, if you want to use that term, that might be able to bring all the players to the table.
And if Sudan thinks that the solution lies in the hands of the strategic partners, you are dumb. Let's put it that way. You will continue engaging yourself as long as the Russian-Ukrainian war is going on. There are other very relevant conflicts around the world, in Asia, in Taiwan, China. We have issues going on in the Sahel region. And that all of these have overshadowed your current engaging position that you are. So I think if you are listening from the Sudan, or you are a consultant working to advise the Sudanese situation, then the message is clear. They are planning to get you to answer questions tomorrow. And people will pay the price. And if there is a solution, why not? Don't wait for the United Nations. If you're waiting for the United Nations, you are dumb. Let me say that again. If you're waiting for the United Nations to come and bring in the peace and the solution, you are making a fundamental geopolitical failures in today's strategic currency. I hope the message is clear. The US has spoken where they stand, and maybe you were hoping for geopolitical partners. I think African Union and Kenya to an extent to restart the engagement and draw down this conflict to an end. Because at the end of the day, it is the Sudanese people who are paying the price. I want to thank you for watching. Let me know in the comment section why the Sudanese war is still raging and why the world is not paying attention on what's going on in the Sudan. Smash the like button. I will be looking forward to meeting you in our next episode. We still have 2 or 3 of this particular review coming on this very important, wide-ranging interview that was done in Washington. Have a good day. Bye-bye.